Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Sneaking a peek at your partner's phone, what's the harm, right? But did you know it's actually against the law? We're going to talk about why snooping isn't just wrong for the relationship, it is also illegal. My guests are Michelle Thomas, family law attorney and founder of MC Thomas and Associates, and Tariq Omari Walton, licensed marriage and family therapist and co-host of the Kings of the Heart podcast. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you joining me for this conversation. This is going to be juicy.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on here.
Thanks for having us. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So before we get to the tea, as it were.
He's warming up, y'all. He's warming up.
Yes, always doing that. I do want to share a couple of fast facts with you. According to Pew Research, 51 of respondents to a recent survey say they have checked their partner's messages without them knowing. 57% say they caught their partner looking at their phone without permission. And 71% of those asked said they had used their partner's phone without them knowing. 40% felt very comfortable with their partner looking at their phone, and 42% feeling uncomfortable with it. 83% of the people said that their partner has told them the passcode to their phone, and 54% remembering the passcode, 29% forgetting it after being told. I want to get to the legal part first. And, you know, Tariq, as a married person, where's your phone? Is your phone with you, or is it somewhere else in the house?
It's currently with me, but she knows the passwords. Emergencies happen, so she has the information she needs.
Okay, my man. I appreciate that. So, Michelle, let's talk a little bit about the real legal repercussions of accessing a partner's phone or even social media without their consent. And does it matter whether they're married or not?
Yeah, well, this is a big one, Harold, because as you can imagine, as a divorce lawyer, a lot of the evidence we see comes from text messages, photos, videos on their spouse's phone. So
No.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so legally, what happens is if you're in an area where it's not permissible, you run the risk of, one, not being able to use the evidence at a trial, such as in a divorce trial. But also, if a spouse wants to be really vindictive, they may try to press charges, and you don't want to put yourself in that situation, depending upon how contentious the separation or the divorce is, if you get to that point.
Wow. And does it matter whether we're talking about a married couple versus someone or a couple that is just partnered?
Well, certainly. Well, you have a right of privacy whether you're married or not. And there are federal laws that apply to both married and in separate or individual people. But I would say that certainly if you're not married, based upon, I judge your relationship status based upon how you file your taxes. Did you file separate, married filing separately, married jointly, or single? If you filed single, then you certainly run the risk, I think, of being in even a greater trouble if, in fact, someone gets angry and decides to take action against you for violating their privacy rights.
So, Tariq, let's talk a little bit about the relationship, part of this. Who is more likely to snoop, men or women?
It doesn't matter the gender. It matters the suspicion, right? It's all about where your relationship is and if you believe that something's going on outside of your marriage or your relationship. And so it's not really so much about, which gender is more likely to do it. Whoever has the suspicion, they're going to pick up the phone and look.
Oh, come on now. I'm sure you know who's doing more snooping than not.
Look, men do it all the time too. I sit down with my couples and I hear it all the time. If they're suspicious, they're gonna look, right? It's all about the suspicion. If they have an inkling that their mate might be having inappropriate conversations or whatever it might be, even if it's not necessarily about them dealing with somebody else, even if they're just suspicious that they're talking to a friend about their business, right? They may look on there. And so it doesn't matter the gender. It all matters. The only thing that really matters is whether or not you think your mate may be doing something behind your back.
What do you think of the consequences of snooping from your perspective as a relationship counselor?
The one of the things I tell people all the time, if you feel like you have to snoop through your mate's phone, there's already something major going on in your relationship. Right? There's already some major issues happening if you get to that point that you want to pick up their phone and look inside of it. Right. So there's already something going on. So there's something bigger than just looking at the phone. But beyond that, my thing is this, and I tell my clients this all the time: don't be prepared to look in the phone if you're not willing to walk away from that relationship. Because the moment you find something that you don't like, you're stuck with a choice. You're going to confront the person. If they say, hey, okay, I found out now, deal with it. What are you going to do? Are you going to be ready to leave? If not, you're kind of stuck. If you confront them and they want to do something different, still understand there's a level of disappointment that you'll be living with that now has become part of your everyday interactions with your mate. And so once you look on that phone and you find something, things are going to change in your relationship. And you have to be ready just to deal with that, much less deal with their feelings of being violated for looking in their phone.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that a little bit too at one point during this conversation. But Michelle, this is a federal crime. Are there legal ramifications, for example, in the DMV, where from state to state? And also, how do you know that someone has violated your legal rights as far as privacy?
Harold, in this digital age that we're living in, I used to always say money leaves a paper trail, but there's also a digital footprint that leaves a foot trail wherever you go, online, on digital, on devices, and so forth. And so now a lot of times we have what we call forensic evidence or forensic, I think scientific sort of ways of determining exactly who has access to a cell phone, when they've accessed it, when they've downloaded documents, photos, videos from a phone or from the cloud or whatever the case may be. And so I would say it's close to impossible to attempt to take actions on a device and not be found out. And so the same thing happens with text messages. There are programs where you can extract a full record or history of text messages from a phone. So it's really challenging for people who think they're going to be able to do this on the low. But I did want to say, Harold, to your point about who snoops more, men or women, I do think both probably do it. But I think that men get caught a whole lot more often than women do.
That's true.
Because women are just a little bit smarter, it seems like, about these things. And men just leave they're just trails all over the place. So I've definitely seen that. But
smarter or sneakier, Michelle? Are they smarter or sneakier? Hold on.
I like to call it smart.
Okay, let's okay.
Yeah. Translation, Michelle. Men are messy, and
men are lazy.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, we're lazy.
Oh my goodness! But see, one would say, well, if men get caught more frequently,
you said it.
Yes, I did. I'm helping a sister out here, but if men get caught more frequently, that might suggest that women are doing, more snooping. It just seems logical to me. Michelle, take me inside, some of those kinds of conversations when this issue comes up for your client. What kind of things, are they finding? Remember, this is a family show, of course, but
I had to remember that because the first thing that came to mind, I probably shouldn't say, but I have had experience seeing clients and experiences where so it may start with a text message that pops up on the phone in the middle of the night. Or maybe someone forgot their phone when they went to work and left it there, and then a message pops up. You can be sure that if your spouse sees a message and either doesn't recognize the name, or maybe it's a photo that's a little provocative or suggestive, that's going to lead to more inquiries. And so that person is going to either, if they have the passcode, they'll probably enter the phone. If they don't, they may try to look at other ways, such as seeing if it was uploaded to the cloud, whether it be Google Photos or iCloud or whatever the case may be. But the other spouse is going to track this down and find out the source. The other thing is, remember, we have these things called like Find My Location, right, on our devices. So sometimes the spouse can look online and figure out exactly where that cell phone has been. And if you tell someone that you're at your, mother's house, but you happen to be down the street somewhere else, that can also inform the person and trigger someone to investigate further, which certainly includes oftentimes going through someone's phone. But it's the photos that someone may think they deleted from the phone, but didn't delete from every single device that get found out. It's videos sometimes. There's so many ways, and someone gets sloppy at some point, and it leads to just further destruction.
And I guess it would really be suspicious if in the middle of the night, if you got a text from the neighborhood pizza parlor in your phone.
Right. Like how you're masking the names, right? Who it really is.
I was going to say, and that happens too. People try to camouflage the names, but if it's a photo that it isn't quite right coming up, I mean, there's questions that are going to be asked. So I think to Tariq's point, can you handle the truth? And if you can't, then you may just want to stand down on searching your spouse's cell phone.
So, Tariq, here's one of the other things. If your spouse goes through your phone, or no, let me ask this instead. What do you think is the best way to handle your phone? For example, we can get into email and all of that and social media, but let's just stick with the phone thing. What is the safest way to make sure that the relationship is healthy as it relates to phone stuff? You said in the beginning that your wife has your code and and all of that. That's an obvious one. And I would also imagine you only have one phone, I'm guessing.
Yes, I only have one phone.
Okay.
Why are you trying to set me up? Why are you trying to call me out? She's gonna watch this, so why even trying to set me up for this?
That because we know that so many professional people have two phones,
right?
And that that is a whole thing. But when you enter into that relationship, what should be your own personal policy regarding the security of your phone and the person who is your heart's desire?
Well, it's all about the conversations you have early on, right? Setting those boundaries, or letting the person know, hey, here's my information. And it's not even about trust at that point. Like I said, for us, it's about family and emergencies. And if anything happens to me, she needs to have access to what's on my phone. But having those kind of conversations, setting those boundaries, letting each other know what the rules are around that kind of phone privacy issue, right? A lot of people have things they want to hide, conversations they want to hide for whatever reasons. And they're going to be very sensitive. How they kind of tilt the phone a certain way when they're around their mates, and they don't want people to see certain things on there. And so when you're having those kind of behaviors, of course, you're going to make your mate suspicious. But the idea here is, what are you guys even trying to understand or want the other person to understand about how you use your phone, right? If you have business, stuff on there for like people like us who run their own businesses, if you have, just other privacy things on there that may not be other people's business that you don't want to share, okay, have that conversation. Outside of that, it's just really about respecting each other. If you don't trust your mate, which is one of the most foundational parts of a relationship, if you don't trust your mate and you believe you have to go through their phone, there are other things you need to be working on.
Hold that point. hold that point. I'm going to let you finish. I've got to take a really quick break, but don't forget, you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about marriage and privacy, whether it's your smartphone, your email, your social media. What are the legal and relationship ramifications of snooping? My guests are Michelle Thomas, family law attorney and founder of MC Thomas and Associates, and Tariq Omari Walton, licensed marriage and family therapist and co-host of the Kings of the Heart podcast. Before the break, Tariq, you were talking about not trusting your mate. Please finish your point.
So what I was saying is that you have to have trust within your relationship. The moment trust is broken, there's so much work you have to do to regain that trust, to get around forgiveness and things of that matter. But if trust is a constant issue in your relationship, where you believe that you have to even have a tracker on your mate's phone to know where they are, where you feel like you have to have their password so you can look in their phone to see what's going on, if you are constantly snooping on there and taking pictures, I'm sure Michelle can talk about this more so too, but people taking pictures of information on their phone, on your phone, if all that has to happen, then where is the trust in your relationship? And if you believe that your mate is doing very suspicious behaviors, there are conversations you need to be having before you even find the need to pick up someone else's phones.
Michelle, let's talk about the penalties for someone who has been going through someone's phone. As you said, there are electronic footprints, and so if someone's spouse has gone through the phone, downloaded whatever, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, are folks going to jail for this kind of stuff?
You know, I haven't seen anyone go to jail for this kind of stuff. And, you know, you mentioned an interesting distinction earlier, Harold, about married partners versus those who aren't married. And there are sometimes spouses may be able to circumvent some of these rules and some of these laws if a cell phone, for example, is a family plan, or the parties are, you know, jointly sort of holding the cell phone. They're both on the account. They're co-owners of the account. Sometimes you may be able to get away with it in ways that you wouldn't if you're not married. That being said, you know, from my experience, obviously I'm a divorce lawyer. I haven't seen anyone prosecuted for violating any federal communications or electronic wire, you know, laws. But certainly there are instances where evidence can be excluded from the divorce trial because it was obtained improperly or essentially unlawfully. So that's one thing you want to be mindful of is you know, if you need this information, how can you access it in a way that will make it admissible in court? But also, if you need this information, as Tariq mentioned, you're really already in trouble because, you know, it's about transparency in a marriage and trust and communication. And at the point that you start needing to snoop and all of that, that's just has just gone down the drain. Also, I see a lot of times couples being more inclined to search their spouse's, you know, social media or phones when there's already been a history or a past of infidelity. Mm-hmm. And so when there's been some sort of breach of that trust to begin with, you're going to see a lot more of this kind of behavior. But again, is it healthy for you to remain in that situation? That's really the question.
Using my law and order degree, let me ask you, Michelle, when you said if you, in a divorce proceeding, if you need this information, can this information be had through discovery instead of snooping?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I was thinking about when I said that. I didn't know how deep you wanted to go into that, but yes.
Can I get a dang? Because
yeah,
LA Law Herald.
There you go.
Yeah, so you got it. We've had many conversations, Harold, where we've talked about, how you need to consult with legal counsel as early as possible in the process and get advice about how to, if you suspect your partner's cheating or has used wasted marital money on them, how can you access the information in a legal manner? And so you can get this through discovery. You can serve what we call document requests, essentially, where you're asking someone to download their entire Facebook pages, Instagram pages, all the social media pages, and turn that over or turn over passwords. A court can order someone to turn over their passwords to their social media accounts. You can ask for all the text messages between parties and photos and all of that. So you can do that in a lawful way that would still help you to be able to get to your end goal, which is admissible evidence in your case.
Tariq, I want to ask you about, and you touched on this before, about trust, but I want to go back to, I think, the beginning of a relationship and not when you're well into it, because I guess in this conversation, you want to be able to prevent this kind of problem as it relates to the relationship. And you know that even in intimate, loving relationships, and correct me if I'm wrong, that sometimes true transparency and trust, not maliciously, but just isn't there. I mean, how much do we really know about our spouses? I mean, you see what I'm getting at here?
Let me say that, first of all, the suspicion that people may have around their spouse's behavior may not have anything to do with their spouse. It could be their own past history and relationships. And so now you have this history of being with people who were unfaithful or very sneaky in their behavior, and you're just taking that and putting that onto the next person. And so now everyone you're with, you're suspicious of. You have a hard time trusting in the first place. And so, yeah, this is where the snooping comes in, not necessarily because of your mate's behavior, but because of your own troubled past. So you have that happens. But then, like Michelle said, you have people who have a history of infidelity with their mate already. And so now it's just part of the process of me needing to look to see what else you've been doing because you've gotten caught in the past. And let me tell you, I don't have too many clients who say they actually enjoy looking through their mate's phone. They hate the idea they even have to do that. They don't like doing that. But they don't believe that their mate is being transparent. Again, like Michelle said, they're not being transparent enough. And so they have to go search for themselves. But nobody actually likes doing this.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, more specifically, when you are developing a loving relationship, and trying to build trust and openness and what have you, and I'll just, I can speak from man's perspective. How do you balance your own sense of privacy with wanting to be fully open with this person that you are beginning to love?
Mm-hmm. There may be no balance.
Oh dear.
No, there may be no balance. It is all situation to situation. Mm-hmm. You have to learn the person you're with, right? Again, if you're with someone who has a history of distrust issues because of their previous relationships, you're gonna have to be a little bit more sensitive to how they observe what's going on around them and your behavior. So again, they may be just naturally suspicious of you only because of what they've gone through. Being aware of that will be helpful. So now you know the conversations you have to have with them. Look, I know what you've been through. I understand that. I'm empathetic to that. I want you to understand that that's not me. So watch me. If you don't trust me right now, watch me and believe what you see. And so again, you have to have these conversations and understand the person. If you have a history of being unfaithful, if you have a history of getting caught, you're really kind of suspended your privacy at that point. If you want to maintain a relationship with that person, you kind of have to give your privacy up in order to regain their trust. Mm-hmm. You've already gotten caught. And so you want to sit back now and be mad at your mate for looking through your phone? No, they don't trust you. And they have a good reason not to trust you. And if you both are deciding that you still want to work this out, you have to do the work to regain their trust, and not the other way around. So yeah, you might have to give up some of your privacy.
Michelle, we've spoken about smartphones, but what about email and social media? Is this all in the same bundle?
Yeah, I would certainly consider email to be in the same bundle. And I don't know why social media use wouldn't be in the same category. But certainly there's been a history regarding emails that if someone leaves the email open in plain sight, plain view, that's different. But if you are essentially cracking into their account to read and review emails, that could certainly be problematic for someone. And so, you really do have to respect boundaries, both within the context of the relationship, but then also respect the need for transparency. And I think you're right that it's hard to strike that proper balance. And so it does require constant communication about what works, what doesn't, and being sensitive to someone's needs. And what I hear you both talking about is really these unresolved traumas, and what needs to happen to heal some of that baggage that you're bringing in, so that you're not so distrustful if your mate didn't do anything to deserve that behavior, because that's also how you can drive the person away.
Mm-hmm. So if a client comes to you, a new client, and says, I want a divorce because my spouse, I have proof, electronic proof from snooping, not discovery, because again, this is a new client of yours, and they've gone through his or her email, they've gone through his or her phone, gone through his or her social media that they did not have passcodes to. What do you tell them?
What I tell them is certainly what would remain in an attorney-client privileged conversation. We would have a very direct conversation about the implications of any such behavior, and talk about what you and I, Harold, talked about are the lawful and legal ways to gather the information so that it can be admissible in a court of law, primarily through the discovery process, depositions, subpoenas, things of that nature.
So if you're telling him or her, all of that stuff that you gathered, it's illegal, so you can't use it. We could find out in discovery, but they still want to get a divorce. And this is, I guess outside the actual purview of this particular conversation, but still, well, I suspect and since I can't use this, but I feel it in my heart, then they still have a leg to stand on, because they say, I just don't like this is a family show. I just don't like the person anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, this is every day for me, right? In terms of my work week. But yeah, I mean, if you have suspicions, if you've seen things that are concerning, heard things that are concerning, certainly you should discuss all that with your attorney, and it's up to your lawyer to devise a strategy to explore all avenues and gather the evidence that would be needed to help leverage any settlement negotiations or defend your position in court and in trial. And so, certainly as a lawyer, it's incumbent upon lawyers to do things the lawful and legal way, which is how I would certainly proceed. But it's, you should have an honest conversation with your attorney and let the attorney sort of take it from there, guide, advise, and let you know what can be done, what can't be done or used. And so, but a lot of the times it does start with, and I hate harping on the cell phones, but a lot of times it starts with the cell phone and the information that arises from there.
But you know what, Harold, the thing about that too is the cell phone and the behavior around the cell phone is just a symptom of other problems in the relationship. So if someone's coming to Michelle saying, I want to get a divorce because I have suspicions that my mate is doing something. All right, well, for me as a couples therapist who's working with people who deal with infidelity, what else has been happening in your relationship other than just that? So you have to have more conversations, because if you're going to that extreme because there's one thing, then you're missing something else. There's something else that's happening in your relationship that's unhealthy enough that says to you that you need to move on. it's not just about the phone. It's never just about the phone and what you discovered. There are other things tied to that makes that just a symptom of the larger issue.
Mm-hmm. So, which brings me to go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michelle, please.
Yeah, I just had one question. So, what I see people doing, I think, is just being in denial. I think a lot of times,
very much so.
A partner doesn't want to. They don't want to read the signs. They don't want to accept the signs, and then so seeing it in the actual physical form, whether it be photos or whatever, that's that confirmation, and then that's where they kind of spiral from that point. But I think a lot of times people know, but they're just in denial about it. They don't want to accept that their partner would do this to them.
Right.
Interesting. So,
or even their accountability and why the relationship is the way that is, that the person's even stepping out in the first place. I mean, there's layers to this, layers to it.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
Well, and certainly we, as it relates to that, we certainly wouldn't want to blame one spouse or the other for why the other one is stepping out. That's a bigger therapy, for that.
Yeah, not blame. It's not about blaming, but it's recognizing that your relationship is fragile for a reason, and that both people are playing a role in why it's fragile. And yeah, your mate made their own decision. Again, not mistakes. We're not going to say that you made a mistake because you made a conscious decision to step out here and do that. And that's not your fault that they made that decision. But the fragility of your relationship is on you as much as it is on your mate.
Gosh, I love smart people. Let me ask you this, Tariq. If your spouse snoops and whether it's email or what have you, AirTag on your car, whatever it is,
they track you through the snow and the rain,
and they find nothing. You're not cheating or anything like that. But then you find out that they suspected you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you fix that?
Well, the first thing is to figure out for them, if they haven't found any information, if they believe that you're not actually doing what they suspected you of doing. Because in their mind, they may think, I just haven't found anything yet. So what you want to do is uncover what actually led to the suspicion in the first place, right? Because again, just because I haven't found information now doesn't mean it's not out there. It just hasn't been found, right? So there has to be, a lot of conversations around the healthier relationship. What's happening that you even began to think that I was doing something else, right? So once you have that conversation, your mate also has to be very transparent about what may be happening with them. Again, is it because of their own past trauma in relationships and being, cheated on? Are they the one actually stepping out? And they're just,
Lord.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying? So in their mind, well, if I'm doing it and I'm doing these things, maybe they're doing it too. Let me go check to make sure. So they need to be honest about what they're doing as well. So there has to be a lot of conversations, but oftentimes, let me just say, man, oftentimes if you're suspicious for a reason. And more than likely, there's something else going on that it may not be to the degree that you had imagined, but something probably is going on. So it's very rare that you have suspicions that aren't founded.
There's an old song that just comes to me. Who's making love to your old lady while you're out making love?
Yep, you see those memes. You see stories where guys are like, hey, I know you're dating my wife, but I'm about to go with my girlfriend, so can you take her out for me? So you have this that's going on constantly. Yeah. You see things going on all the time.
As the hip hop aficionado that you are, Tariq, that song is pre-hip hop. You have to look that one up. But
I know the song, Harold. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Michelle, I know you've experienced this with your clients also, and I've always kind of wondered when we're talking about relationships that go through this kind of infidelity trauma, and someone begins to file for divorce, and then they decide to make it work. And this is more of a professional question, professional logistics for you. you've already accepted a retainer, you started the process, and then he or she comes back and says, we're going to make it work. So what do you do next? You just stop? Do you put it in a file? Run down what happens.
Sure. Well, if someone wants to make it work, I mean, I believe divorce should be your last resort. So my questions would be, are you sure? Have you met with a therapist? Like Tariq, have you prayed about it? I mean, I would say, is this what you want to do? And if so, then I certainly, we would close the file. Now, that being said, Harold, I often keep the file on the side. I don't really discard the file because it's been my experience that oftentimes people end up coming back because they don't actually resolve the issues. They might sweep them under the rug, and those underlying issues are still present. Sometimes people have certain attachment styles where it's simply hard for them to let go. Sometimes there's a fear of embarrassment, and there's due to their standing or status in the community. So there's a lot of reasons why people hold on longer than they should.
Right.
So it's rare, actually, that by the time you get to my office, you reconcile. It can happen, certainly.
You mentioned status in the community. What do you mean by that?
I might also ask them whether they want to do an agreement.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Well, sometimes, I mean, you have what we call these power couples. Sure, you have what we call these power couples in the community, and they're involved in all these organizations. There are tons of mutual friends. Sometimes they've helped each other advance and reach certain goals. And so the deterioration of that marriage would really sort of send a ripple effect through their circles, through their perhaps professional standing. And so there are a lot of reasons why people stay. And so if it's not necessarily sincere that they want to reconcile, I may sometimes hold on to the file because I think they may be back, but I certainly hope that people can, save divorce as the very last resort, certainly.
Yeah, one would hope. And certainly, yes, as you were saying, if someone is, comes to you and says that they want to file for divorce, and then they want to, halfway through the process, they decide to reconcile, and then they come back. And I think that is even that's a much sadder situation than the initial. How do you counsel repairing a relationship, Tariq, after there is infidelity? Oh wow, that's
I'm laughing.
That was a serious question, but
I'm laughing because that's like half of my business, man.
Really?
I mean, there are so many people that come to me after infidelity. I mean, literally, I can spend probably, I would say, a good 8 sessions a week where infidelity has been part of their narrative. Right. So it's common. I mean, people, man, we can get in a whole conversation around this, but people are going to do what people are going to do. You can trust that. If you don't want to sit back and try and figure out whether people are going to be faithful, you can trust people are going to fulfill their own selfish needs. So it's going to happen. Right. So you see that a lot. And like Michelle said, you have people who don't want to necessarily get divorced because they may have a certain lifestyle to maintain or standing in the community, their ties to their church and their faith and their belief around, marriage and divorce. And so they may try to stick it out. So they come see me so that they can actually work on the trust and the forgiveness. And those are 2 major factors that people struggle with.
But how do you do that? I guess that's my question. How do you work on, on the trust and forgiveness? Do you give him or her a hall pass because, well, you did it to me, I gotta do it to you, or what?
No, never get a hall pass.
Revenge, that's why you do your job and I do mine. Go right ahead.
Yeah, revenge, that makes for a good story, but now that it's never gonna benefit the relationship, right? But the thing is, start with forgiveness. First, you have to understand what forgiveness is. Do you know how many people I talk to, whether I'm lecturing or I'm talking to clients, who once I define what forgiveness is, realize they've never forgiven anybody in their life? And so a lot of people don't even know how to forgive. So you have to get to the idea around forgiveness itself, that concept of forgiveness. Forgiveness, easily just to define, is basically deciding to no longer be angry about a situation, right? So you've gone through it, you'll have the memories, but you're no longer holding on to the negative energy, the negative emotions around it, and you're accepting it and you're moving on. You have a lot of people who have never gotten to that place, who've never learned how to forgive. And so they continue to hold on to that. Even if their mate is doing everything that you asked for, you can't let go of the anger. You can't forgive them. And so that, again, is going to play a major role in the way that you're interacting in your relationship every single day. That lack of forgiveness, that negative energy, those negative emotions.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter what your mate does at that point. It doesn't matter if they are abiding by all the things that you want them to do. If you can't forgive them, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah. I only have a few minutes left here, and I'll ask both of you for just some final thoughts about, snooping and the relationships. And Michelle, I'll let you have a last word first.
Sure. Trust your instincts. Read the signs. Don't ignore red flags. And then if you believe that there's a suspicion or a problem, seek help. Seek competent legal counsel. Seek pastoral counseling, therapy, and so forth, to help you process what to do and how to strategize, and how to be proactive about protecting your future. Whatever you do, don't break the law. So someone should be able to help you navigate and map out the next steps. But a lot of times, before you had to snoop through the cell phone or social media, you already knew. So read the signs.
Mm-hmm. Final word on this from you, Tariq.
Yeah, if you're going to go ahead and do that, if you're going to look for your mate's phone, be ready for the consequences. Be ready for whatever's going to come afterwards. If you find what it is that you believe is in there, you have to understand what your next steps are going to be. Are you going to stick around to try and make it work out? Or are you going to make a way out of the relationship? But you have to be prepared for whatever those consequences are once you find that information.
Mm-hmm. And probably the best thing, I guess, as far as trust is concerned, just make sure that your passcode is your wife's or your husband's middle name or pet name, Pookie. If it's Pookie, you can all... That way you'll always stay out of trouble. Keep phones up.
How about just stay out of trouble? Why don't we just do that? Just stay out of trouble.
How about that? Michelle Thomas, Tariq Omari Walton, thank you so much for your insight, your expertise, and a little bit of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Harold.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That is the Daily Drum for this Friday, January 17th. For News Director Renee Nash, I'm Harold Fisher. Good night and have a wonderful weekend.